Hey guys, welcome to a video talking about the ASR mount from SilencerCO. Now this is kind of a polarizing mount on the internet. You've got a lot of guys out there using the mount, myself included, and then a whole lot of discussion online about how your can is going to go flying off your rifle if you use this mount. So let's take a look at some of the design features and pluses and minuses of using this mount. So first off, I've been using the ASR mount since about 2015 when I first picked up my SilencerCO Omega. Now it came with a direct thread and with the ASR mount option. I've got several rifles that I wanted to shoot with it, especially several AR style platform where I didn't want to have to mess with direct thread, threading the can on and off, and then keeping the threads protected when I wasn't using the suppressor. So I ended up getting muzzle brakes and flash hiders for several AR style rifles, shooting it off of 223s, 300 blackout, 6.8 SPC, and so far I haven't had any issues with those. Now I've also shot it off of bolt action platforms in 308, 260, 6.5 Creedmoor, and I actually compete with the ASR mount on my SilencerCO Omega. So when you take a look at the mount, I've got a hybrid right here. The ASR mount is something that actually goes inside of the back of the suppressor. So the ASR mount actually screws into your SilencerCO Omega. You can get it for the Harvester, you can get it for the hybrid, and screws into the rear of the suppressor, and then it uses a locking mechanism. So when you thread on the can, you use a large Acme style thread to thread the suppressor on, and then you use a locking collar to lock it into place. The tabs on the inside of the collar actually grab onto the teeth. There's no ratchet system where you're ratcheting it on like some other manufacturers have used. You're actually screwing it on and then just locking it into place. Now, one of the issues, and where you see people complaining about this online, is the issue of if the lock collar is already in the locked position. And the problem with that is, again, it's not made to ratchet on to those teeth. So if the collar's already in the lock position, it just won't thread on all the way. So what you end up with is an issue where the can, as you start to thread it on, will stop. Usually you'll hear a ratcheting noise, but it'll stop short of where it's supposed to be. So that becomes an issue if it's in the lock position, you try to thread it on, and you don't realize that it's in the lock position, because you'll end up only partially threading the suppressor on and potentially not realizing it. Now, I have done this a couple times where it's in the lock position and I thread it on, but I'm always looking at the suppressor, I'm looking at the mount as I do it, so I've never had an issue where I didn't notice it. I basically, as I go on, I hear that ratchet noise, and I look down, look at the suppressor, look at how far it is on the mount, and realize, oh wait, that's not all the way on. So make sure the locking collar gets moved to the unlock position, tighten it the rest of the way down, and lock it on. Now, the discussion of repeatability. Now there's a lot of different mounts on the market that you can use for your suppressor. In fact, Q, Griffin Armament, a couple of those companies actually make adapters so that you can take an Omega or a suppressor that's designed for the ASR mount and put their mount on it. And I've never used any of those, so I don't know that any of them are necessarily worse. Now I know a lot of guys do like to go to it to get rid of the locking collar, but in my experience, I haven't had an issue with the ASR. So if you want to use one of those, great, but I don't necessarily see a need to go away from the ASR just to get rid of the locking collar. Alright, so one way that I can see an issue with the locking collar is if you want to mount your suppressor under the handguard. One disadvantage of using a locking collar on the suppressor is that you do have to be able to reach that collar to lock and unlock the suppressor. So if you want to, say, mount your hybrid on a pistol caliber AR and you want to mount it below the handguard, or even let's say a Omega and a 300 blackout, you want to mount it with maybe a 7-inch barrel and a 10 or 12-inch handguard, you're not going to be able to do that with the ASR style locking collar. You'd have to have an extra space in there to access the locking collar and be able to lock and unlock it. If you do want to mount it under the handguard, you'll have to go with one of the other options on the market. That could be, the Griffin Armament, the Q, or even the dead air options. So that is one of the few places where the ASR really does not work properly, as if you're trying to mount it under a handguard. Alright, so what about all the reports online of people launching their suppressors off of their guns? Now obviously I haven't been there for any of those, and I've yet to do it myself after almost 4 years of shooting the Omega with the ASR mount on a variety of hosts, including in matches and competitions, at the range, out in the forest, national grasslands. I mean, I've shot it all over the place. I've got right around 5,000 rounds through the Omega, which isn't the most compared to a lot of people, but a lot of that was through bolt guns. And I've never had an issue mounting and unmounting the Omega. Now, some people have. I'm not saying that it's never happened. If you look online, there's quite a few reports of people shooting their Omegas right off of the gun. And how does that happen? You know, some of that's going to be my speculation because I wasn't there, but in general, it's most likely because people had the locking collar in the locked position and only partially threaded the suppressor on. And then they're firing it, and you know, and on a rifle especially, there's a lot of pressure built up that suppressor is containing. So if it's not mounted properly, it's going to basically turn into a rocket off the front of the gun. So what causes that? In my opinion, after using the Omega for several years and the ASR mount and reading through a lot of these internet reports of launch suppressors, I think it's user error. It's typically people that are leaving the locking collar in the locked position and only partially threading the suppressor on. And then it can't hold on to that pressure because it's not properly mounted, it's not attached all the way, and then the suppressor goes flying. So I don't necessarily see a point in claiming that the ASR is a flawed design when a lot of the issues with it are user error. So if you think it's going to be an issue for you that you can't mount the suppressor securely every single time, then maybe it is worth going with a different mount. For me personally, it's never been an issue. And now that I've been using it for several years and I have a handful of rifles with the muzzle brake or flash hider for the ASR system mounted, I obviously don't want to go and switch to a different mount. You know, that adds up. That's one of the things that a lot of people don't necessarily think about with suppressor ownership. You get something like the hybrid, and it's a versatile can. It's a decent, you know, starter can if you want to be able to mount on a variety of different guns. But when you start looking at the cost of the ASR adapter, the Bravo mount, or the various muzzle brakes and flash hiders, and then you start looking at the cost of pistons, and you know, maybe you want to do a 3-lug mount on a pistol caliber carbine, you know, that really adds up. So if you know at the beginning that you don't want to use the ASR mount, then that's fine, switch to something else before you really invest into it. But those of you that have already started investing into the ASR mount, I see absolutely no reason that you would need to switch away from it unless you have a specific need that isn't addressed by it, such as mounting under a handguard. That's one of the only ways that I can see that the ASR is really not working as well as it could. Guys, I'd love to hear more of a discussion on this, what you think of the ASR mount, what you've used instead of it. Obviously I don't have a lot of experience with other mounts, not that I wouldn't be interested. I've just shot the Omega so much, and then now that I've added a hybrid, I'm sticking with the ASR mount because it's an option. So I'd like to hear in the comments below, let me know what you think on the ASR mount or some of the alternatives, what you think is better and why. And as always, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next video.